Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Your hosts are Joseph and Madison Whalen, a father and daughter team making their way through the challenges of the teenage years.
Welcome to Insights into Teens, episode 139, Maintaining Healthy Relationships. I'm your host, Madison Whalen, and my co-host, Joseph Whalen.
Hello, Maddie. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic.
So how's your week been?
It's been good. I've got a new hire down in our Maryland facility, much faster than I thought, so things are looking up for us.
Nice.
How about you? How was your week?
It's been fine. Nothing really too big has happened, but, well, despite, Valentine's Day, I got to eat lobster and I went to the dentist.
Okay. I'm not sure which one of those was the good part, or if both of those are things you look forward to. Good for you.
Thanks. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today. So today we're going to be talking about maintaining healthy relationships, and we're kind of having a different change of pace. I read up the notes for the show, and apparently I'm hosting. So
You are owning this one, sweetheart.
Yay. So relationships come in all shapes and sizes, but regardless of whether the relationship is platonic, romantic, or familial, it should
Nourish?
Sorry, I don't know why I forgot that word all of a sudden.
You did fine on the read-through.
It should nourish and support us. Having healthy relationships can make a huge difference in our mental health and well-being, but creating healthy relationships takes time and effort. On this episode of Insights into Teens, we'll take a look at what you can do to create and maintain healthy relationships in your life. But before we start, I'd like to invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can hit us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and much more. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can hit us on Twitter at insights_things. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. We're also on Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings. And there, you can find links to all of these and more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com.
Nicely done.
Are we ready?
I think we are.
Alrighty. So, first question we're going to pose is, what is a relationship? Now, if you're a long-time viewer, you might have known that we've already discussed a bit about relationships on this podcast before, but that was mainly to detail toxic relationships and how to deal and move on from them. But we're not going to be talking about that today. So, today we're going to look at the other side of the spectrum and how to maintain positive relationships. So, the term relationship has a variety of meanings, something we discussed on our relationship podcast. But today we're kind of just go by one basic term that we're going to decide to use, which I was able to get from my health class presentation. And this term is known as a bond or connection you have with other people. While this is a very broad definition for what relationship means, it covers most of what we're hoping to address on today's podcast. And there are different forms a relationship can take, as well as different terms associated with said forms. And in order to keep with the spirit of the podcast, we're going to look and define these different forms.
So when we hear the term relationship, most of us think about romantic relationships in which two people are dating. Although this is a very prominent type of relationship, people often mistake it for being the definition of what relationship means when it's really only a subcategory of the term. There are plenty of relationship types that aren't related to romance. Some of these include platonic, familial, professional, academic, and even community relationships. While some of these relationships might sound familiar, it's not likely they all come to mind for everyone. It's important that we distinguish and notice the various forms of relationships that there are, and don't just associate the term to mean one or two specific types. In the end, all these relationships matter, and it's also important to notice which aspects of your life different relationships apply to. So before we get too deep into this, when you discuss this in your health class, did they kind of feel out or talk about in detail what kind of relationships you've formed at this point in your life? Because some of these aren't going to apply, I have to imagine, right?
Yeah, but they kind of more or less gave us the different kinds of relationships that there are, as well as helped us kind of define some of them. Like platonic was a big one that they ended up getting us to define. There was an entire definition of it. And they also pointed out some of these other relationships that I didn't even think of. Like, I didn't think of the community relationship until I ended up seeing the PowerPoint.
So what kind of examples did they give for community relationships?
Like, kind of, in a way, your role in society, almost. Like, what you contribute to whatever cause. Maybe voluntary acts, like doing community work and such.
So for us, for instance, for Mommy and I, maybe our association with the Band Parents Association would be a community relationship.
Yeah, about that.
And your association with the band itself would be more of an academic relationship.
Yeah, probably.
So some of these relationships could potentially cross over as well.
Yeah.
Any other situations in which you think some of these might cross over?
I can kind of see familial and platonic relationships kind of crossing over. Like, either you're really close friends with the people in your family, or you're so close friends with someone that they become your family.
Like an extended family type situation.
Yeah.
I could see something like that with professional and platonic too, where you may meet somebody through work, develop a professional relationship with them, and then you might start hanging out with them and doing things outside of work, and it becomes a friendly platonic relationship with them at that point in time. So I guess the important thing to point out is that the types of relationships that we're talking about here are not mutually exclusive. They kind of denote the different activities, perhaps, the different feelings, maybe, the different status of what the other individual might mean.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the important thing here is not all relationships happen to be romantic relationships.
Yeah.
There are a ton of relationships that happen. Like, for instance, I have, at my work, I have an individual who happens to work for me now, who was a contractor for the longest time, and he would come in one day a week and do work for us on a contract basis with a company that we were employing, and he and I became friends as a result of that. And then when he was looking for work and wanted to leave where he was at, he wound up coming to work for me. So that kind of encompasses like three different types of relationship there, which is kind of a interesting combination.
Yeah.
So what do you say we take a quick break and we come back and we get a little bit more into roles in relationships?
Sure.
All right, we'll be right back. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, World Boss Hunts, Star Wars Trivia, Guild Lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Teens. Today we're talking about how to maintain healthy relationships. So now we're going to discuss more in depth about the roles that we take in relationships. So previously, we mentioned the different types of relationships that exist. So now we're going to break them down and define what each relationship means and possible roles that you could play in said relationships. So the first one we have is romantic. So due to the common misconception that this form of relationship is the predominant definition of the term, most people are aware of what a romantic relationship is. It's known as the voluntary relation between two people who feel in some way attracted to each other in a romantic and sometimes sexual way. It's basically just the act of loving another in the terms of dating or even marriage.
Then we have platonic, which we've talked about a little bit already. So in a platonic relationship, it can be defined as a significant relationship between two people that's based on trust, caring, and consideration. Platonic relationships are often referred to as friendships. Friendship is a very common relationship to have, and it can be between all age groups.
Next up, we have familial, which we also kind of talked about. Along with romantic and platonic, this is a very common relationship in most people's lives. This relationship stems from a bond or strong connection with a family unit. A lot of relationships are biological, but some aren't, kind of like how we mentioned that platonic and familial kind of mixed.
Exactly, yeah. Then we have our professional relationships. Now, this is one that probably won't apply to some of the younger folks here until you get out into the working world. But professional relationships are that of your work environment or just the people you communicate with in your job. This type of relationship could also involve customers, vendors, or other people you interact with professionally. I talk to a lot of vendors in my work. I've become friends with several of my vendors. And if you're a friendly person, you can't help but make friends with people. In a professional environment, it usually, if you manage the relationship properly, in a professional environment, being friendly with your vendors can be very beneficial from a business standpoint as well. You get preferred pricing, you get first dibs on certain products that come out. You're the first one that they call if they get something new. So kind of being in the thoughts and the front of their mind at that point in time by being friendly with them helps. It's not just about getting a free lunch here and there, but it's about relationships. And business is very much about relationships, probably even more so, I think, than personal life, because there's a dollar value associated with it. And the relationships that I have on a professional level aren't just relationships for me, they're relationships for my company. So my company is counting on me to do a job. In order to do that job, I have to manage these relationships in a way that they are profitable. So there's a little bit more pressure on the relationships probably. And because there's a dollar value usually associated with it, they tend to take a lot of precedent in your professional life. What else do we have?
And then we have one that's also kind of subjective to a specific group, and that's more for the younger people, which is academic. So this relationship is found in a school environment, hence the name. This relationship can apply to anyone and everyone that is in attendance in a given school environment. So it would basically apply to me and pretty much any student. It could happen, and it basically happens once you start school, basically.
So would you consider a relationship that you have with a teacher, correspondence and stuff like that, would you consider something like that an academic relationship? You being a student, them being the teacher?
I mean, yeah, because a lot of times I'm hoping to succeed academically, and having a specific academic relationship in order, like, so that I'm able to pass my classes and do well with my teachers and communicating various academic goals that I have. Yeah, I would definitely say that that there is that academic relationship between me and my teachers.
So, based on that definition, would anybody that you interact with at school be considered an academic relationship, like your marching band instructor?
I mean, in a way, he is also kind of a teacher. And like that probably would be a bit more of a casual relationship, and it could probably even be a mix of some other relationships, like platonic and such. But yeah, if it's still kind of in a school environment, there's still kind of that academic relationship.
Okay, that makes sense. So, the last one that we have is your community relationships. And these are pretty self explanatory. They're known as your relation to your community. Whether your community is a town, a city, a religious congregation, you more than likely have some relation to your community. And the first one I think that comes to mind for me, we already talked about the Band Parent Association. Another one that comes to mind would be something like a volunteer fire company. I used to be part of the volunteer fire company in my old town. And it's one of those things where the entire community centered around that activity. Whether it was bingo night or the softball games, whatever happened, the community kind of rallied around the fire department. Where a lot of small towns, it's your football teams, your sports teams at your high schools. When we were going to the football games for marching band, that was when people saw each other. They got together at a community event like that. Can you think of anything else that would be a community type of environment or community relationship? We talk about religious congregation as well. I'm not a particularly religious person, so that doesn't apply to me anymore. That kind of did when I was a kid, but not so much now. What else would be community, do you think?
Well, like, I think of like volunteering at soup kitchens, or volunteering to just help out at some local business.
Sure, Sam, our host of our Insights into Tomorrow podcast, your brother, when he was in high school, he volunteered at a food pantry. I don't know if he still does. He might still do it. But that was one of his things. Once a month, he'd go out there and he'd help with the food pantry. So, yeah, volunteer work like that would certainly qualify as well. I can't think of anything else that would be community related.
I guess, like, my one teacher kind of gave an example of, like, maybe there's, like, a neighbor who, like, is kind of elderly, and,
oh, yeah, sure, I could see that.
And, like, you help out, like, if there's snow, if it snowed, like, you offer to shovel.
Yep, and my mom used to do that. There was an elderly woman in town, and she couldn't take care of her house anymore. My mom would go over and help her cook and clean, and a couple days a week she'd cook meals for her and clean her house for her. Going around and I guess raking leaves even for people, or shoveling snow. I mean, that's almost a professional type of relationship where I had one guy who always would hire me and my friend to come shovel his snow because he couldn't do it himself. But, we didn't charge the guy what we would charge normally. It was a couple bucks here and there just for the hour or two it took. So, yeah, sure, anything that you're supporting the community with something like that. What else do we have?
So, in our relationships, there are different roles you may take on throughout your day. So, by roles, we mean that basically what part you play in a relationship. So there are different roles for every relationship, and we'll list a few examples. So first up, we have some academic roles, which would be something like a teacher, student, classmate, band member, staff, principal, or a counselor.
So of those that you listed, How many of those interactions do you think you have on a regular basis?
I interact with my teachers. I would probably be considered a student, and I interact with my other classmates.
Sure.
I'm also technically a band member. Once marching band starts up, band member starts kicking in.
Right.
Sometimes I don't really interact with, like, other staff that aren't really my teachers.
What about, like, lunch aides and stuff like that?
I mean, sometimes. They kind of, just kind of patrol, and such.
We were fortunate enough to interact with that one staff member when we lost our phone and we had to get into the building to find it.
Yeah, that was...
Yeah.
I've had interactions with the principal before.
Well, you keep showing up on his list, You get on that principal's list and you're going to interact with the principal.
And I did have a recent discussion with a counselor.
So all these have applied to you at some point in time.
Yeah.
Any of these particularly significant to your day-to-day activities?
I guess, like, the interactions with my classmates and my teachers, for the most part. I don't see, like, I'm not like a regular band member anymore. It's kind of just like, okay, when band season starts, that's kind of when I start becoming the band member again.
Right.
Sometimes I interact with some of the staff, sometimes I don't.
So there's some effort, but there's certainly some impact to your day-to-day life on your academic relationships.
Yep.
Okay. So the next type of relationship, is the familiar, and this is pretty much anyone in your family. It could be your parent or guardian. If you are a parent, could be your son, your daughter. Could be a sibling if you have brothers and sisters, your aunts, your uncles, your nieces, your nephews. The one that's important to mention here is stepchildren. Stepchildren, this is one of those situations where there may not necessarily be a blood relationship. It could be stepchildren. It could be adopted children. It could be children that you're fostering.
Extended family.
It could be extended family. They're all relationships that fall into that familiar relationship. And what are some of the traits that you could think of a familiar relationship that distinguishes it from other relationships?
Like, maybe kind of how you interact with them. Like, maybe you have certain jokes you tell them, or just, like, certain things you do with them that you don't normally do with other people. You probably have this is probably one of the very much closer bonds.
Yeah.
Because, like, I feel that, like, platonic relationships end up turning into familiar relationships at some point, because I do feel that familial relationships are, like, the strongest relationships.
Well, and the funny thing that is absent in these roles is husband and wife, because they'd fall more into that romantic relationship, even though they're technically family by marriage.
Yeah.
But I would think that it's probably a relationship that's a bit more forgiving.
Yep.
They're going to be a little bit more accepting of you. I'd hope they'd be more accepting of you.
If they're not,
If they're not, you need to pick a different family.
Yeah, pick a different family.
But I think it's one of the ones that kind of sticks out because, like we talk about extended family, we have a lot of extended family. In fact, most of our family is extended family because pretty much everyone on my side of the family has passed away, and pretty much everyone on mommy's side has passed away. Few siblings here and there, but for the most part, our support network, as it is, we rely on friends who are extended family. In fact, Mommy was just talking about, kind of an extended family member with Regina. And she is, when I was stuck in the hospital that one time and we needed someone to sit with you, she stepped up. She was the first person to step up. That's what makes you family. When you're there to support people, no questions asked. When you're there at the drop of a hat, when you're the support team at that point in time. And it's a special type of relationship. It's not just that platonic friendship relationship. There's a certain level of trust that goes with that, right?
Yeah.
Like, we wouldn't leave our young child with just about anybody. It has to be someone that we're going to trust.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an important type of relationship, and the roles in there are very defined but very important.
Mm-hmm.
The next one, obviously, is going to be our professional type of relationship, and we've talked about some of the roles already, but you have colleagues, people that you work with. You might have a boss or a supervisor that you deal with. You have a CEO or a company owner or some of the higher up management that you work with. And if you're a supervisor or a boss yourself, you might have employees. The position that I'm in right now, I'm a director of a department. So I have people below me and I have people above me. So it kind of gives me a unique perspective where I kind of touch most of these roles here. But I'm the type of person that I try to be, my one employee constantly refers to me as firm but fair, but I like to get along with my employees. I like to treat them, not, I can't treat everybody like they're a friend, because you can't manage friends. It's very difficult when you have friends and you're trying to manage them. But it's not just a do your job, I'm your boss type thing. I hate being called a boss. I really do. I'm more of a coordinator, a traffic director. I'm there to make sure the job gets done and everyone interacts as they're supposed to. And I generally have that kind of relationship with the upper management in my company too, so I'm very fortunate when it comes to that. What are some of the roles in communities?
So in communities, you might be a religious member, a citizen, or a neighbor. And,
Yeah, and if we look at, some of the examples that we had before, you could, if we're talking volunteer fire company, it could be a member of the fire company, it could be an officer there. It could be someone who's volunteering at the soup kitchen, and that's the kind of relationship you might only see them, once a month. You see them, how's the kids, how you doing? You might interact a little bit there, and then it's down to business to kind of do whatever the volunteer work is. So the community could be any number of different roles within the community itself. Sometimes it's politics. It could be the school board, and you go to the school board meetings and you interact with them that way. Or if you're a band parent, you go to the monthly band parent meetings, or we show up at the competitions and we support each other that way. And that was a thing that I have to say was surprising, but in a good way, was the level of interaction that we've found we had with the community of the marching band. And it wasn't just our group. It wasn't just the parents from our band. You saw that kind of support throughout the competitions. In one competition, there happened to be a member of our group who was very vocal, cheering her daughter, because it was her senior year. It was the last competition of the year, and she was down there and making a big deal about it, and everyone loved it. You had people up in the stands who were from other bands. They're all clapping for her because of how she's clapping for her daughter. So that level of community there with people that were complete strangers, because of what the parents were doing, because of the fact that you were there to support your kids and all the other parents were, didn't matter that it was a competition. You were all there for a common cause, and that was to support the kids. And to see that, and that happened a couple of times throughout the year too, where at one competition I had someone that was sitting next to me while I was in the stands, and they were going crazy. So I was cheering for them, and they're a kid too, and everybody clapped for every band. You didn't just clap for your own band. So there was a sense of community there that I've never seen before. Really, I mean, it's almost, I don't want to call it fanaticism, because that almost sounds like a negative term, but there's just a sense of community, where, yes, my child is in this marching band, but we're here to support all the kids. And it was a very, very uplifting feeling, I think I could say. We have a couple other categories. What do these fall into?
these kind of were ones that I really wasn't too sure where they would technically go. And there are a couple of miscellaneous terms that I kind of just added in. Those could include that of a tutor or that of a friend.
So a friend, now we've talked about platonic relationships being friendships. So they would probably fit into that. And a tutor probably would fit into our academic relationship category. We didn't list that in the academic relationships.
Yeah.
But there could be other things. For instance, I have a gaming group that I run for this online game. Technically, I guess that's an online community. We didn't even talk about that. Mommy has communities that she participates in.
Like book clubs.
Her book clubs, exactly. So these are all different types of relationships that we have. And those relationships can certainly extend beyond that. Like Mommy became very close friends with several of the women in her book club. So there's that platonic relationship that happens there. Some of the women that were in there, we've actually engaged in business with them because one happened to do home renovation. So we actually wound up using some of her staff to do some work on the house here. So that spawned into a professional relationship type of thing. So relationships themselves can be very complicated, but they can be very rewarding as well. So why don't you take it from here?
So there are many relationships that make up our lives, and there are even more roles we take up in those relationships. And like you said, relationships can be very complicated, but are often very rewarding. So we're going to take a short break, and when we return, we'll talk about the traits of healthy relationships and how to maintain a healthy relationship.
All right, we'll be right back.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Teens. Today we're talking about maintaining healthy relationships. And now we're going to discuss more about the traits of a healthy relationship. So in healthy relationships, people respect and support each other. Healthy relationships nurture you, bring out the good in you, and encourage you to make healthy decisions in your life. So there are four main qualities of a healthy relationship, one of which is known as mutual respect. So with mutual respect, you show respect towards other people in your relationship, and in turn, they show you respect. You would also accept each other's opinions, tastes, and traditions, despite the fact that they might be different. Mutual respect also comes with the ability for people in a relationship to agree to disagree, instead of trying to force their opinions onto each other.
Caring is another trait that's important to healthy relationships. This means that you treat each other in the relationship with kindness and consideration. When experiencing difficult times in a relationship, you show empathy and support those that it affects. Being caring also shows that you're willing to help out others.
Another trait of a healthy relationship is honesty. So there's not really much to this, it's just that you're open with others rather than concealing your thoughts, feelings, or emotions.
And the last one that we'll talk about here is commitment. Being committed means you contribute to the relationship and work to keep it strong, even if it means making some sacrifices. This also means that you deal with problems in a positive way and are able to overcome them.
So now that we've talked about the traits, now we're going to talk about a specific skill you can use to maintain healthy relationships. While we've mentioned the traits of healthy relationships, we're now going to discuss a particular skill you can use in order to strengthen and maintain strong relationships. So this particular skill is known as the 3 C's, and the 3 C's are communication, cooperation, and compromise.
So the first one we have is communication. Communication is a major factor in all relationships. People in relationships need to understand each other. It's important to learn effective communication skills so you could express your thoughts, feelings, and expectations to others in your relationships, as well as to better understand theirs in return.
You also have cooperation. In relationships, people need to cooperate with each other. Cooperation means to work together for the good of all. Cooperation can help strengthen relationships as long as everyone does their part.
And finally, we have compromise. There are going to be points in your relationship where either side wants different things. The best way to combat the possibility of conflict is to compromise. Compromise is a problem-solving method in which each participant gives up something to reach a solution that satisfies everyone. That's not to say that everyone's fully satisfied in every compromise.
Yeah.
There's an important distinction.
Yep. So, if you're able to utilize the 3 C's method, you'll be able to maintain healthy relationships with the people around you.
So, with all that said and done, let me ask you, do you think the relationships that you have now are healthy relationships?
I do feel so. I don't feel there's any real signs of them being inherently negative, and I do feel that most of them may have some of the 4 traits we mentioned before.
Have you ever been in an unhealthy relationship?
I mean, there are definitely relationships that I ended up having to cut off, either because we didn't communicate well enough, or we just wanted different things. And I actually do have a pretty big example, and I guess that's probably my relationship with one of my friends when I was in 6th grade. And I think a lot of that was I was going through a lot at that time. It was a lot emotionally, and I really didn't know how to handle it. But I'd probably say overall, the relationship, mainly due to me, was kind of unhealthy. Like, I still really cared for my one friend, but at times I would randomly lash out at them, and there was probably poor communication on my side anyway, because I didn't really communicate all that well. I let my emotions kind of take the best of me, and most of the time I would normally have to be the one to apologize, and at that point I was able to calm down and figure out the best way to communicate.
Okay. Well, at least you were able to find a way out of that type of situation.
Yeah.
So I think that's all we had today. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll get your closing thoughts and your shout-outs.
Alrighty. Alrighty, so to everyone out there, I just wanted to say that it doesn't matter what kind of a relationship you're in, whether it be platonic, romantic, familial, community-based, stuff like that. It's important that you maintain a healthy relationship of any kind. And if you do feel that you are in a not unhealthy relationship, I'd probably recommend checking out our other video on relationships in order to get a better view of that. But if you do have a good relationship and just want to strengthen it or be able to maintain it, I hope that what we offered here will hopefully serve well in the end.
Okay. It's also important to note that relationships are tough. They're not easy things. If you want them to be worthwhile, they require a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it requires work by everyone who's involved in the relationship. You have to be willing to compromise. You have to be willing to give. You have to be willing to communicate. And I think if the relationship is important enough to you, then the sacrifices that you make for that relationship are more than worth the rewards that you get.
But it's also important that you also state what you want from the relationship and
Absolutely.
make sure to not have it go for one side or the other.
Absolutely. Relationships are a balance.
Yep.
So good thought to leave us on. Before we do go, I want to once again invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Teens. Video versions of this podcast can be found listed as Insights into Things. We're available on Pandora, Castro, Stitcher, Podbean, any place you can get a podcast these days, you can find us. Also, just a side note, we are now releasing our audio podcasts on the Insights into Things feed as well, just for convenience sake. You can also reach out to us, give us your feedback, give us your show suggestions. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. We are on Twitter at insights_things. You can find high-res versions of our videos on YouTube at youtube.com/insightsintothings. We do stream 5 days a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings. If you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, you do get a free monthly Twitch Prime subscription. We'd appreciate you throwing that our way. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. We're on Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings, or you can find links to all these and more on our official website at insightsintothings.com.
And don't forget to check out our other two podcasts, Insights into Entertainment, hosted by you and Mommy, and Insights into Tomorrow, our monthly podcast, hosted by you and my brother Sam.
Yes, and we just published a new episode of Insights into Tomorrow after a very long hiatus.
Yay!
But that is it for our podcast today. Thank you for listening and watching. Another one in the books.
Bye, everyone!
Bye.